everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me online. Morning, Steve. How you going? Cool, cool. I'll wait the obligatory 60 seconds until 11 a.m. Morning to those in New Zealand. Good early morning to those in Australia. Good evening if you're joining us from Europe. I suppose it's good afternoon from the eastern seaboard of the United States, and good evening from the west. I forget. Good something. Hello. East is evening. Okay, good evening to the East Coast, good afternoon to the West Coast. There we go. I suppose that makes sense. Cool. If I knew how to do a barrel roll, I would. All right, that's close enough. I'll get started, and I'm sure more people will probably roll in as time runs over. Otherwise, this will go up on the YouTube channels afterwards. So two parts to the stream this morning. The first, I kind of need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is coronavirus and the impact on that 2020. That's not the announcement I'm making this morning. I'll get to that in hopefully about 10-15 minutes. I'll try not to rattle on for too long. But I know there's a lot of nervousness and unease from the community at the moment about what's happening with NACS this year, and I kind of wanted to speak a little bit to where we are and kind of the thought process we're going through. So I should probably introduce myself. I'm Greg, aka Dimmyhawk, so I am co-hosting NACS 2020, hopefully, alongside Steve, aka Guy Next Door. I've been on the Resupply podcast series once before, had planned to go on again, but I've kind of changed the format because we're all sort of craving a bit of Laserforce at the moment, and I thought this would be a nice way to bring some stuff forward and look at what the future of the sport could potentially look like. So let me just get the first thing out of the way to start with. Officially, we are aiming to make a final decision on the 1st of June. Now, I know that's a long way away for some people and a bit too close to July 20th for some people. We absolutely hear you, and we understand how difficult it is and the challenges that people are facing at the moment. You absolutely have our sympathy, particularly if you're in a position where either your family or your job is being affected. So we will wait officially to make the decision on June the 1st, but I have some advice coming for those people who are uneasy about that date. A little bit of an update on where we are. In New Zealand on Wednesday night, we officially went into level 4 quarantine and lockdown, which basically means everything except for our essential services are shut. So the hospitals are still open, the supermarkets are still open, petrol stations, but pretty much everything else is shut, and the orders from the government are everyone is to stay home for at least the next 4 weeks. We don't know how long it's going to extend. For now, we know it's going to last at least 4 weeks. It could go for longer. We don't know. That's not our call to make. That's for the New Zealand government and the Ministry of Health to make. But also our borders have been shut, I believe, since Monday to all non-essential travellers. So basically, if you're not a New Zealand citizen or permanent resident, you can't get into the country at the moment unless you provide some sort of critical essential service. So the simple fact of the matter is, if the border lockdown remains in place and people can't get into the country, then that simply can't happen. So June 1st is the official date, and Steve and I will be talking about that regularly in the coming days, and we'll look to the New Zealand government and the New Zealand Ministry of Health to give us an indication of sort of what the country may look like on July 20th. And if we don't think it's going to work, then we will look to postpone nationals, possibly till next year. But we'll have discussions around that on June 1st, and I'm sure we'll make an official announcement with all the information you could need. So this is now my advice to you guys as an international community. This is not the official standpoint, if you will, of NATS 2020. So this is just kind of how I'd do it if I was, say, based in the States or Australia or Germany or Europe and looking to come to NATS 2020. Prioritize your families and your jobs over traveling. It's going to be a real difficult time. We all understand that, and you have the utmost sympathies from myself and the wider Laserforce community. If trying to commit to coming to Auckland in July is too much of an unknown and could affect your current job or a new job that you may have to pick up, or affects your plans as a family, prioritize those. So the near and the distant of it is, consider cancelling your plans now if you've got more important things happening. And I know people will say what's more important than Laserforce, and we're all devastated that we are where we are now, but families and jobs do need to come first, and we understand that, and nobody will be given a hard time if you do have to make that decision. So if you're on the fence at the moment and you're not sure and you can't wait until June the 1st, my advice right now as a fellow player would be to just pull the trigger and say that you're not coming to NATS, and that's okay, and that needs to be the decision that's made by you as an individual. We can't at this stage tell you whether or not it's happening because we don't know, and we'd ask for a little bit of understanding, as much as we give you guys understanding for needing to commit to coming or not coming. Which kind of brings me on to my next point, which is that NATS really is more about the community of Laserforce players than it is about SM5. And the reason I say that is, even if we get to July and the borders are open and the isolation and the social distancing thing has subsided and we can play Laserforce, we won't host NATS if we can't have the whole community there. So if, hypothetically, say Americans still can't travel to New Zealand, but Australians can, we won't host a NATS. We will host Laserforce. We will absolutely host something July 20th through 24th. We'll play as much Laserforce as we can. Steve and I frequently talk about what we'd love to do if we had a bigger player base here in Auckland for our members' nights. So we might look at doing stuff like setting up a team of 3, you join another team of 3 to make a 6, and we have some kind of tournament like that. We may run rapid fire SM5 tournaments. We'll look at our options, but if we can't include everyone, we won't consider it a NATS. So if you're looking at this and you're going, I'm fine, I'm going to keep my travel plans, I'm still coming to New Zealand on July 20th, assuming I'm allowed to, we'll still have a good time, we'll still play lots of Laserforce, we won't consider it NATS. So we won't officially hold NATS until all the players from all the countries who want to participate can be here and can play as a community. And so the whole topic of community kind of brings me on to the next thing, is that to get to NATS, you kind of need 3 things, right? The first is availability. So you need to have time off work, you need to have family arrangements, and you basically need to be able to take that chunk out of your life to commit to traveling to another country to come and play with us. If you can, start talking to your employers now, and just give them a heads up. I've started talking to my manager at work and have just said, look, I mean, he knows we were planning to run the tournament anyway, and I've already booked in the time off work, but I've said, look, we don't know if we're going to be hosting it at this stage. And he said, that's cool, just give me information when you can. Start having those conversations now with your families, with your employers, with your friends, and just say, look, I'd love to go in July. Maybe I've had to cancel now, but if things change, I might consider going instead. So just, give people the heads up. And if you're in a position where maybe you're going to have to find a new job as we come out of this pandemic, then let that take priority over that. I mean, have a chat to them and say, this is something I've been planning for the last year, I'd really love to go. Is there some flexibility here? If so, great. If not, don't pressure yourself, right? I mean, we all need to eat and survive before we can play Laserforce. Otherwise, Laserforce isn't going to happen. If there's no community, there's no Laserforce. The second is flights. So you need to be able to get to New Zealand, and that's obviously dependent on whether or not our borders are open, for one. But the other thing is that the tourism and travel industry are taking a massive hit at the moment. And my suspicion, and this is purely speculative, but my suspicion is that when everything does resolve, flights are going to be fairly cheap because the airlines are going to need to bounce back. I think there's going to be a little bit of global fear about travelling. I think people are going to sort of hold off international travel for a little while various countries settle down. So flights should be relatively cheap, I'm hoping. So, you know, if you make the decision to cancel now and then in June we announce that it is going to happen, we're hoping flights should be cheap enough to rebook if possible. But again, that's up to each individual. If you've used some sort of loyalty points or some sort of reward system, I mean, touch base with your airlines and find out what their plans are. I know lots of different companies have got lots of different schemes, so, you know, communication really is kind of key at the moment. And the last one is accommodation. So you need somewhere to stay here in New Zealand. That one, I'm not sure how it's going to look coming out of this pandemic, but myself personally, I have space for probably 3, 4 at a squeeze. I could probably take on 5 people, so I could probably host almost an entire team in my house, as long as you don't mind sleeping on couches and floors and wherever I can find space for you. Hopefully that side of the tourism industry will react like the airlines and will drop their prices down to try and re-encourage business. But if not, then, you know, there are other options available, and I'm sure a number of the Auckland players would be quite happy to act as billets and to put you up if they've got space available. I can think of at least a couple of people off the top of my head from Auckland who'd be more than happy to house people if they've got the space to do so. So kind of the point I wanted to make here is that there's only 3 things it takes for you to get to NATS if you cancel now and we decide to host it when we make our decision on June the 1st. So we can't really help with your availability, which is why I kind of stress talk to your employers, talk to your friends and family now. But we can help with flights and accommodation. So if you're listening to this now and you think he's basically saying cancel, and you cancel, and I totally am in support of you making that decision, and then June 1st comes along and Steve and I say, hey, we are hosting NATS, it's going to go ahead, and you say, but he told me to cancel my plans and now I've lost all this money and stuff, come have a chat to us. I'm not going to personally pay for every single person who's been affected by this to fly out and stay in my house, but, you know, I think as a community, and that's what my 3rd bullet point was about, as a community there will be support there. People may have contacts within the airline industry or the tourism and hospitality industry. Come have a chat to us. We'll find a way to get you here, right? If you're available and you're keen to play on July 20th and you've cancelled as a result of what I'm saying today, then come have a chat to us. We'll figure something out. We'll fundraise if we need to. We'll put people up in houses. We'll sort you out, right? So if you're sitting on the fence and you're nervous, cancel. And then if things change and you do want to come have a chat to us. I mean, we're not going to give out charity. We're not all absolutely made of money. But, you know, if paying for 25% of your airfare and providing you with accommodation is the difference between you coming and not, then arrangements can be made, especially if you've got, you know, extenuating circumstances like you may have lost your job through this pandemic or you may be in a difficult position. Don't pick Laserforce over food or housing, please. That's not what I'm saying. But, you know, we'll make it happen to the best of our ability if we can. And that kind of brings me on to the final thing I wanted to say, which is speaking to the wider Laserforce community. Remember that your centres are probably going to take a hit during this time. I'm not sure how other countries are reacting. I know a number of them are going into lockdown, similar to how New Zealand is. But remember that those guys are losing their income, right? That's their form of business. So as soon as we come out of this, and as soon as the social isolation sort of stops, go and support your local centres if you've got one. Apologies to the guys in California, and I know that's a sore subject point, but, you know, invite your friends and family. You don't have to play SM5. Create a social group. Grab a bunch of people, go down and play Standard or Supercharge and Rage, because they're all 3 hits while you're a level 6. But if you're in a position to, pump some money back into your local centres, because they're going to be taking a big hit, and without them we can't play Laserforce. So, you know, Laserforce Auckland have been closed, I believe, since Wednesday night as part of the government orders. We actually haven't played a members' night at Auckland for a couple of weeks now because collectively as a group we decided it was safer to simply not meet, and there were enough of us who were concerned about social isolation that we decided not to go ahead for it. So coming out of it, give them your support as best you can. Offer to help spread word of mouth about them, organise groups, basically just get some people going through their doors when it's safe to do so, and don't necessarily look to governments to make that call for you. Use common sense. Not speaking to any country's government in particular at the moment, but let common sense prevail above all things. I'm just going to quickly read through chat, make sure I haven't missed any questions. Living your tax. Yeah. I mean, we could sleep in the Auckland arena if accommodation does become difficult. Why not? Right. Does anyone have any quick questions for me about Nats this year? It's probably all I can answer in terms of official decisions. Stuff like postponing it to next year or who's going to host 2021 aren't my decision to make. I'll hopefully be part of that process, but I can't make that call at the moment. All I can say is to help people make a decision about this year's travels based on the information that I've got. So hopefully that helps. Cool. All right. I don't see anything coming through in chat, so let's just switch her over. And we'll go to that camera and there. Okay. So on to the actual announcement that I wanted to make. So if you follow along with the Resupply podcast, and you all should follow along with the Resupply podcast, you might have heard me talk a couple of weeks ago about the potential future of the sport, particularly in looking at how we sort of broadcast it. I sort of touched on potentially teaching it, treating it like an e-sport type of thing. But if you followed along with Russ on the podcast a little while ago, you'll have known that Laserforce headquarters, based out of Brisbane, have put out a new update that has essentially exposed the live game events in a file that we can read in real time, and the absolute opportunities this has opened up has been massive. So I want to give a big shout out to the guys at Laserforce HQ. Particularly, I've been liaising with Paul McGugan. I want to say thank you, Paul, for kind of helping out with this and to making it all happen. Thanks to Russ for answering my 8 million questions about MVP and how it's all calculated. And I've got bigger shout outs to make, but I'll do those in time. So I am teasing, and this is foreplay, so I'll get to the surprise soon. I just want to set the stage a little bit. So I know change is difficult, and I know people like the way things are, but there's a lot of opportunity for us to change how SM5 kind of exists in terms of the data display. I'm not talking about changing the game. The game will stay absolutely the same. But you look at the scoreboard for SM5, and it's not really readable, even for experienced players, right? One of the first things we do is we look at how many medics, how many lives each medic has on each team to get a kind of a state of where the game's at. And unless the medics are both in the last place, like, say they've gone for an early base run, they're kind of hard to find, right? You've got to find the medic, look at their lives, find the other medic, look at their lives, and compare them. So there are kind of better ways of doing this stuff. And the live feed basically means we don't need that scoreboard anymore. So what I've been doing over the last probably 8 or 9 months has been taking our existing layout for it and kind of just rejigging it and making it more, I hope, readable. and sort of easy to digest. So what I'm about to show you is a potential prototype for NATS. NATS 2020, if it goes ahead. Failing that, NATS 2021, if we host it, and if we don't host it, for anyone who does host it, if they want it. So what I'm showing you is not just for Auckland, it'll be freely available for all sites once I've kind of finished it. And I will open the code base up to any programmers in the community who want to make their own sets of changes. So this is kind of my gift to the community, if you will. Please bear in mind that it is still very early in the development stage. There's still a lot of work left to go on it. It's kind of, you'll see where it's heading, but bear in mind that this is not the final product. I'd love to grab someone who's got graphic design capabilities from the community to make it look nicer for me. There's a lot of testing to go. There's a lot of other changes that'll be required. How many more user stories do I need? So my last task list had 89 items on it then. So yeah, there's a lot of work left to go. So please bear in mind that it's basically an alpha. But all right, I'll stop teasing. Let me show you guys what it looks like, and then I can talk over it while it's running. So the data you're looking at as it goes through is one of the games from our training nights at Auckland, and it is using the new file format courtesy of the guys at Laserforce HQ. So without further ado, enough lead up from me. Let's have a look at it. We'll just let that run for 30 seconds or so you guys can kind of just digest what's on screen before I start talking. So it's got the elements of the existing scoreboard in it. One of the things you might note right off the bat is that the players within the team aren't ordered by score. They're sort of arbitrarily ordered by position. And the reason for that is we found it didn't really matter too much who was top scoring for a team. Most SM5 games at competitive level tend to fall out in this same order: Commander, Heavy, Scout, Ammo, Medic. But we found that this was actually way more helpful to be able to compare the roles in each team. So you've got the Commanders next to each other, the Heavies next to each other, the Ammos and Medics next to each other. So what you're seeing is the player position. That orange bar going around them is their special points. The number below it is how many special powers they've got available. So in the case of the Commanders, how many nukes they've got stacked, Scouts for rapid fire, and the Ammos and the Medics for their boosts. Then you've got the player name, their current score, how many lives they've got, so both the actual count but also a visual indication for kind of where they're sitting. So red is below 25%, yellow is below 50%, green is below 100%, and blue is full. And then same for shots. So a couple of things that are missing that I haven't put in yet. One is the bases, so you can't identify which base each player has destroyed, and penalties is the other thing. Oh, and missiles for the 3 hits. So they're still yet to go in. You may notice the tracker on the right hand side. That's very similar to the existing one. I've just kind of added the player positions in as well so that we can see which position each player is basically playing. Some room for improvement on how that works, but I'll work on that in the coming months. Something that I think is really neat, and for those who are really keen on Fantasy League, would be of utmost help in the bottom left corner, is live MVP. And I know that concept gets Russ really excited, but I'm using exactly the same calculations that are used by the stats website. And what you're looking at is a live snapshot of how many MVP points each player. Yeah, I know it gets you excited, Russ. I thought you might like that one. So, if you're, say, in this case, if you'd picked Paranoia as one of your fantasy players, then you'd be sitting pretty well at the moment because he's at the top on 13.4. So you'll notice there's a lot of empty space on screen. That top left area above the MVP will be reserved for showing the current game. So in this case it's Auckland A against Auckland B, and what the points difference is over the match. So if this was the second game, it may say something like Auckland B need 8,200 points to win the match, and it would show who's got how many points in the match, and then it will show who's coming up next. So it might, in the case of Nats, up next may be USA A versus Brisbane B, and it would again show you their match stats. So yeah, USA A might have won the match, so they might have won the game, so they're on 2 points, and Brisbane have lost, so they're on 0 points. The bottom right corner underneath the tracker is where the Twitch chat stream will go. So for those of you who watch any Twitch streamers, you'll know that you can overlay chat on top of the streaming window, so that'll go down there so that the commentators can easily watch both the scoreboard and the chat coming in and just increase that level of interactivity. The top of the screen, where it's all empty, is where the cameras will go. So from left to right, I believe the plan was one camera upstairs, one camera down in Disco, which is usually where Green Team are set up, one camera probably watching Long Ramp, which is sort of the main attacking ramps between downstairs and upstairs, and then top right would be face cam for the commentators, which is basically where my face cam is now. And so that's kind of what the layout would look like for the stream. Apart from that, the bar at the top where the time is the prediction algorithm, so there's an underlying AI behind all this. It's not hooked up yet, which is why it's not changing, but essentially if you watch most forms of competitive sports, they've got some sort of form of, based on the game so far, this is who we project will win. I don't know how many American sports do that. I know stuff like cricket in New Zealand, that weird sport that's like baseball but isn't baseball, kind of has like run rate projections. So it's kind of similar to that. So as, well, in this case, red team, Auckland A are absolutely kicking our ass. You would expect that red bar to be further over to the right-hand side. And so it would probably be, on an estimate, halfway between where the score is now and the right-hand side. So that'll move and sort of show you who the AI thinks is winning the game. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm up to now. Just kind of a very different take on where we are. Other things we can add in is we can put an overlay on when a commander has dropped a nuke and detonated a nuke, so you've got much better clarity as to when that event happens. What else are we talking about doing? Giving an indication when a scout's on rapid fire. That hasn't gone in yet either. That will go in. The other thing that can happen is with this 0 point penalty system, which I know had a lot of success at ECT recently, we can display penalties without them being subtracted from the score, because essentially, like, I'm controlling these scores live. So say, or pick me for example, because I know I'm likely to get a penalty or two. If I got penalised, you would see the penalty appear next to my name on the scoreboard, but I would stay on 560 points, assuming I was still on my 0 point penalty limit. And so what that means is you're not trying to do math in real time, figuring out what the actual difference between the scores is, assuming that those 0 point penalties got rescinded. And there's lots of discussion in the background about should we make it like, can you only have 5 of those before we start giving actual penalties, and we'll figure all that information out further down the track. But essentially, we'll be able to display in real time whether a player got a penalty, if that penalty did subtract 1,000 points from them, and the impact that that has on the score. But apart from that, I'm pretty keen for feedback. I've only shown this to Steve and Russ so far, so I'm really keen to hear what the community thinks about this. And if you've got any suggestions, if you've got really easy suggestions, I can probably even make them in real time. I know it's a entertaining way of reading it. Player up downs that year, that will come. Not sure if like darkening the color of the player name or putting some other icon on screen for that. Too hard to read. What is it like? Is there a particular part that's too hard to read? Sneak will beat us all. I mean, I guess it's a minute. Yeah, missiles will be there. Missiles just haven't gone in yet. So missiles, bases, and penalties haven't gone in yet. I just, like, my work's been pretty crazy since we went and worked from home. So yeah, all that stuff, like everything that's on the scoreboard now will come across to this new scoreboard. How the other things show up top. I can. This is kind of my loose design that I've been working off. So I don't know if that gives you some idea of what it would look like. And yes, I do all my designs in PowerPoint. Deal with it. Yeah, PowerPoint and Paint, the programmer's favorite tools for designing stuff. So yeah, I mean, we've got lots of flexibility to change it as we want. Yeah, so as Steve said in chat, if anyone can help make this look more pretty for me, like if you do graphic design or UX or any of those digital layout, reusability, readability things, please come chat to me. I'd like to keep the concept much the same, mostly in terms of making it easy for people to read. Cool. I mean, the other thing it is for as well is making SM5 more accessible to people who have never watched or played the sport before. So, you know, I've sat in Twitch chat for the last 3 nats now, and one of the things you ultimately end up answering most often is like, what's the maximum shots and lives for each position, and how many specials does it take for a nuke, and all that kind of stuff. And the visual display of the sort of circles gives you that really good indication, because you can kind of look at, here's a good example, me, so I'm sitting on 24 shots at the moment, and you can kind of see that I'm sitting on about 40% of my capacity, which is right, so you know, Commander Max is out at 60. You can also see that I'm on 2 lives and about to die. So, I mean, I found this a much more entertaining way to follow what's happening during the game. I mean, the first time it ran, I sat here and watched this like in its entirety just because I was fascinated to watch it. And I've had a terrible game. Like, this is one of my worst Commander games I've had in recent times. So some part of it must be interesting at the very least. Carl had a ripper of the game, 18.2 MVP. And of course, there'll be MVP that gets added on post-game because I don't think this game goes to a limb. Ben's hanging on there with his... Oh no, he's not. He's dead. I'm looking the wrong way. I'm looking at the wrong values now. I'm alive, Rich is alive, and Ron is alive. So I don't think this game goes to Elim. But there are more points that get awarded, position bonuses and the like after the game has finished. We can't really account for those in real time. And the clock restarted itself, so that that's a bug. Maybe, yeah, no, or put their name in red, or like just have a big like arrow through their name. Lots of ways we could do it. Little X over that would be cool actually. I like that, Russ. Put an X over their heart. And I'm just going to spin it around again because I'm not sure what's going to happen when it reaches the end of the game. Live demonstrations and all that. You are helping. I like that. In fact, I'm going to write that down. Heart and position, yeah. Heart and position would be good. In fact, heart position and shots even potentially. Can we customize the logos? Do you mean the icons? Like the commander, heart, and bullet icons and stuff? No flags. Oh, yeah, if you want. A custom team logo. Sure. Why not? If teams want to submit a logo for themselves, I'll provide dimensions, and absolutely. Otherwise, your country's flag will be your default. There will be some kind of vetting process for acceptable icons. In the event of a replay, I don't think it'll be difficult. Like, there's no reason we couldn't take this and add the ability to control where you are in the game and go back and forth. Everything that can happen can unhappen. So, yeah, like a replay engine. I love the idea of a replay engine. I don't see it as being difficult, and Russ, I'm more than happy to work alongside you with that. Yeah, it always comes down to time. Oh, we restart a game. Honestly, I haven't tested that yet, but it is on my list of things to check for. The other side of this that's missing, because I haven't done it yet, is basically control for the commentators. And one of the things that will be on there is a button that basically says cancel game. And that will remove any stats that have been written to the database and the current game in progress and basically allow it to be reset. I probably should have added the bottom left where the top MVP is currently sitting. That'll be controllable by the commentators, so it'll probably default to something like top MVP, but it will allow them to switch it between panels that show accuracy, resets, I don't know. Basically, anything you can think of stats-wise, now that we've got the information, they might be like, oh, let's compare the commander's accuracy across this game and across the tournament. And so you'll be able to see, Demi-Orc has an accuracy of this game of 70%, across the tournament he's 74%, Light has, 85% accuracy, and across the tournament he's been 81% accurate. So that is giving the commentators a lot of power. That was the idea, Orange. If someone kills the game on accident, there's not much I can do about that. Any chance we could make a switch with Scoreboard that turns penalties on off when we need to? He said we can make so the penalties don't affect the score, but would he be able to make some sort of switch so that once they cross the threshold, say 5 penalties, we just have to flip the switch and the scores? Yep. So, Glader, to answer your question, the intent was to actually control the penalty threshold automatically once we make a decision as hosts and at sort of the Illuminati tournament committee level. Once we've got a grounding in, okay, the following criteria mean your penalties start applying, the database will actually pick that up automatically, and your penalties on screen, and maybe we'll need different icons for 0-point penalties and 1,000-point penalties. But basically, if you cross that threshold, including in the middle of a game, they'll automatically start applying. Okay, nothing productive out of Twitch chat at this stage. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. The other thing that should be noted, and I haven't actually talked to Russ about it yet, but we should, in theory, be able to upload stats in real time, i.e. there won't be any intervention from the commentators or myself as the tournament director, whatever my title is. It should just automatically, at the end of the game, if the game is accepted as a valid game, i.e. hasn't been cancelled due to injury or accidental bumping, will automatically go up to the stats site. So there's no need to do everything. I don't know. There's been some good stuff at a Twitch chat so far, fan. Russ, you can give me an API to just automatically upload the TDFs without the user interface, right? Yes, says Russ. I can do that. We'll work together on it. Yeah, we've got a bit of time. Even if July does go ahead, we've still got a couple of months to get all this ready. I'm hoping to beta test it at training nights in Auckland, but that's sort of dependent on us being able to play. Don't necessarily fight. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a way to do it. Yes, Stan, but also, like, I assume if it goes to time or goes completely to Elim, it's a valid game. I'll put a control on there to say this game isn't valid, but I suspect it'll more likely be cancelled in the first couple of minutes or at some stage through the game due to injury. Yeah, I'll cover off as many scenarios as I possibly can. During time, okay, yeah, then that's, sure. It's not difficult to do. Add some sounds, yep, so my plan at the moment is to just pull the audio from the game, but I can look at doing custom built sounds. If anyone's a sound engineer or sound designer out there, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about what we can do. I've certainly got I've got access to all the sound clips that the game uses, so I can just play them as I need to. Whatever. Hey, members night's important, man. Yeah, if we want other sounds. Anyone who knows how to find them on the Laserforce PCs? They're not exactly difficult to find. I think they're in a folder called audio. Oh, right, because it's aliens. Yeah. But I mean, we stream that anyway. When we stream the normal scoreboard, that stuff comes through anyway. So I don't think it'll be a problem. Oh yeah, so as Steve brings up, the other thing I forgot to mention is that this is just one of the layouts. We will have the ability to switch to other layouts. So um, Aussie Titles did some really, really cool stuff. But the biggest thing we found, particularly in chat while we were watching, is that while you were on the cameras, we couldn't see the scoreboards. And that was kind of the main thing we wanted to do. So I'm looking at creating a condensed version of the scoreboard so that we could go to, say, bigger sized cameras to watch the action, but still have the game information available there at the same time. And that'll be at the control of the commentators. I should also mention that the fallback to this is we will fall back to the default scoreboard if this doesn't work, or if people are really against us using this new format. We can just fall back to the default scoreboard that we've used for every Nats since the dawn of time. Yeah. Fan, I'm going to need the rights to Josh and the Jet Noise so that we can throw some cheap marketing in there. Yeah, so OBS is a good way to do it, but I'd like to have like a commentator's console where they've got control over everything. So, you know, in addition to changing the panel and stats that you're looking at, you can simply change between the layouts. The other thing is, if you've hopefully all seen the 3D software that I created of the Auckland Laserforce maze, the ability for the commentators to pull that up maybe between games and talk about where action happened to take place. And so if people have got questions about the maze, they can actually sort of on stream walk through it and show in the 3D space where everything exists. I mean, the really cool thing, and I do have to give a lot of credit to Laserforce HQ, is that this game file lets us do whatever we want. I mean, this is just my interpretation of how I think a scoreboard could look. But basically, if you think we can do it, we probably can, within reasonable limitations. But all of the data you'd need for reconstructing the game in real time is there. So, you know, if you think there's a better way to do it, hit me up, let me know, and I'll look at giving it a go. It shows replays in your virtual maze. And until we've got real-time player tracking, that's difficult. Once we've got that, very easy. Check this out. Well, I mean, if you look at where some of the VR and AR technology is going at the moment, 3D tracking is becoming very accessible and relatively cheap. GPS, which is what I talked about on the podcast, was my sort of way of generalizing the concept, but you actually need line of sight pretty much to the sky to be able to use GPS properly. So it's not true GPS, but it is player tracking in 3D. It'd be cool to have a live plus and minus of the player's average MVP to their live MVP, average score to... Yep, that's all very doable stuff. So you can kind of see how they're tracking compared to their MVP across the game, across this match, across the entire tournament, across their pool, if we're in pool play. Yeah, I mean, you name it, we've got access to it. What are your thoughts, Scott? I know you're heavy into the live telemetry and stuff, and probably going to be heading up the commentary team. Feedback, changes, you think it's going to help? Okay, that's cool. New Zealand accent would be interesting, yes. Alright, well, unless anyone else has any more questions or feedback or comments, I'll leave it off there. Not yet, Scott, but Russ and I will talk about that as being a possibility. So we hope so, but not currently. So I'll chip away at this on the weekend and through the week, and if I've got enough of an update, I'll stream again this time next week. So same day, same time, same place. Don't feel compelled to join in. If anything, I'll likely have only added the bases and the missiles. But I'm partly doing this for my own sanity as well, because I'm obviously missing Laserforce and craving it, so this is kind of a good way for me to interact with everyone. So yeah, feel free to come in, have a chat, talk about lasers, talk about whatever in general. I'll go over the changes I've made, which won't be substantial, but I'll be here if anyone wants to come say hi. So thank you for joining, for those who have joined. I hope you guys all like the scoreboard. If you missed the update at the start about coronavirus and its impact on nets, I will put the stream up on YouTube somewhere, or I will give the video to Steve and he will put the video up somewhere, and that should be available probably some stage later today or tomorrow, depending on when he gets onto it. Thanks all, stay safe, good social distancing and all that stuff, look after your friends and family, and I guess I'll see everyone next weekend. Feel free to hit me up on Facebook if you've got any questions, comments, feedback. Always happy to chat to people about this kind of stuff. Cool. See you guys all next time.